Welcome back to the program. Let's get more now on the government's intervention in the energy market. Tony Wood is the director of Grattan Institute's energy program. He joins us now. Tony, what do you make overall of the government's package here? Have they got the balance right?
Look, overall, I think as an exercise in compromise, which there always was going to be, I think they have between setting some certainty around prices that will, coal and gas prices that will reduce the really horrible price increases we were looking at, and dealing with the state governments in the way they've got their agreement has turned out to be pretty good, I think. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. There's a lot of complexity here and a fair bit of time to be worked through in the detail. Maybe a few Treasury officials have lost their Christmas holidays as well, but overall I think it's a good package.
When you look at some of the reaction from industry, the thing that I find surprising is their surprise. They clearly have not listened, or they thought the government would blink, but it's been pretty clear where the government was heading for months, Tony.
Kieran, I absolutely agree, and I think one of the most surprising things about this is that the industry didn't see this coming. They've been told it was coming, and the obvious thing would have been for the industry to say, look, you're going to do this to us, we better find a way that we can have the least impact on us and we can come to the government with a solution that we could live with, rather than saying we don't want anything to be done and to expect that the government, state, federal and governments and consumers would be prepared to accept eye-wateringly high prices, supposedly in conjunction with high windfall profits from the companies, was clearly unacceptable and not going to happen. So I am surprised that there wasn't a solution negotiated, and maybe what we're now seeing is still going to have to be some negotiation, because this mandatory code of conduct in the gas industry in some ways can look quite problematic down the track. And so I think the Prime Minister has indicated there will be some further negotiation as yet.
And it's interesting, you're seeing this scenario where they're talking about a $20 million ad campaign against the package and so on. Personally, I think there's every chance that that's just wasted money, because the political will and goodwill towards a move like this is there, because consumers, people are hurting with these power prices. So it's not like they're going to have a lot of support, I would argue, within the electorate for these big companies when people are hurting around the kitchen table.
Well, look, some years ago now, the Minerals Council fought a very successful campaign ultimately against the Labor government. No one really understood what the fight was about anyway, and the big companies fought very strongly that Australia, big companies, resource companies in particular, were a valuable part of the economy. It's still true. It is true that the gas industry is an important part of the economy, as is the coal industry. But that doesn't come with, a blank cheque. And I think the trick is that if this was a normal sort of development, you might argue there's a case here. But it's so clear that we're seeing price increases coming at consumers, which are going to cause economic and social problems of such a magnitude, that the government, it seems to me, is absolutely on a winner. And I would be very surprised if an ad campaign in this circumstance was as successful as it had been probably the best part of 10 or 15 years ago. That means that they won't do it. And I have some sympathy for some parts of their argument. But the idea that you can effectively take windfall profits and not accept that the consequences are just going to be untenable is almost beyond belief itself.
It really is. Now, Tony, for our viewers who aren't across it in the detail that you are, tell us how much of the gas are we talking about that's going to be affected by the cap and so on? Because the exports can go for till their heart's content in terms of prices on that. So that's not affected. How much are we talking about here that's actually going to be covered by the cap?
Well, the big LNG producers in Queensland, they're the companies we're talking about. They developed their projects in Queensland some years ago now, and fundamentally they developed them to export gas, and they wrote long-term contracts, and they'll produce in total about 1,500 pettajoules of gas this year. The domestic market was predicted by the ACCC on the east coast of Australia to need about 56 petajoules of gas next year. Now, even that might be a bit high. So we're talking about a number that's like 4% of the total volume that was involved here. Now, the difficulty is for these gas producers, it's a very small number. It won't affect the prices they get for their long-term contracts. It won't affect the high prices they can get for their short-term contracts, but it will affect them. The reason it's so important on the other side is that relatively small amount of gas often sets the price in the electricity market, and it pushes up the price for everybody. And even the existing coal and gas generators who aren't affected by the direct gas impact, they get the benefit of those higher prices and they make windfall profits as well. And so you can see why Anna Palaszczuk was a bit worried about her generators that she owns, and also the extent to which coal generators are affected by this, because coal's involved as well, as you know, with the coal cap. But the argument seems to have been about a very small proportion of gas prices, and also, by the way, a very small proportion of coal as well.
So just finally, Tony, given we're talking about such a fraction of the gas that they're extracting affected by the cap, that would suggest to me that the warnings about an investment strike are basically scaremongering, that's not going to happen.
Look, I think before we knew what the detail was, the companies may have been concerned that the cap would apply to everything, including some of those exports. That would be, I think, more of a concern. The fact that it's not, I think, takes that away. At $12 a gigajoule, that's a price that 18 months ago, most of these companies would have been jumping over to get that price. Even the numbers that the ACCC have been talking about over the last little while, the prices have been below $10 a gigajoule. So it's hardly an onerous figure to suggest that $12 a gigajoule is a terrible imposition. And the idea that it would somehow prevent new gas development, I think, is also very questionable, because again, even the Santos Narrabri project in north-western Australia, which I believe now Premier Perrottet and his Treasurer Matt Keane have agreed to fast track, they've committed to that gas coming into the domestic market, and they'll produce that gas at somewhere between $7 and $8 a gigajoule. Now, there's some cost to get it to the East Coast, but it's not, $12 a gigajoule for those sort of developments still remains very attractive. No one likes to see potential profits taken away, but the idea that we shouldn't recognise the impact this is going to have or would have had on customers is just completely untenable.
And a bit delusional too, given their shock. Tony, great to chat as always, and good to get your insights. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran.